E-trucks from Antrim, Hyundai on-street parking, Stellantis, EFuel, Porsche vehicles talk to each other, Civic Type R back on top in Nürburgring. Battery electric vehicles, 14% of the European market. New battery technology. Is the shine coming off Tesla? Changes to the VAT margin scheme. Hello, my name is Paul Callan and welcome to this week's MotorZen News. The big budget that we have here at MotorZen News allowed me to go to Birmingham this week, fly in the morning, fly out in the evening and go to the commercial vehicle show, which having gone to it should actually be called the Light Commercial Vehicle Show. But what was really interesting at that show was, you had Ford, you had Nissan, you had Iveco, you had a couple of more of the bigger brands there. But in walking around the show, you then come to a stand called E-trucks, and I'm looking at this stand and I'm saying more of these electric things. Talk to the guys, learn a bit more, and I discover that this company is based in Antrim. So this is what's so fascinating about the motor industry and the trade at the moment, is that there are so many of these companies setting up producing vehicles. The vehicle they're producing is a small electric commercial vehicle, chassis cab effectively, 3.5 ton. And when you look at where this is going or what this is about, it's really again to do with these low emission zones in towns and cities, predominantly around Europe, where they're not allowed to use conventional diesel vehicles anymore. So there's a whole slew of these purpose-built type of vehicles coming to suit this particular need in these urban centres. This is built on what they call a skateboard platform, so the battery becomes part of the chassis or the flatbed of the vehicle. It's allowing them to be very creative in what they do with the vehicle, but all forms of different forms of bodies can go on this vehicle, but predominantly to meet a 3.5 ton light goods capacity in an area where you can no longer use diesel engines or petrol engines. But again, it's a company from Antrim in Ireland who's producing this vehicle. So you go to a kind of a big show like this with all the big brands and you come on a company like E-trucks. Another regular complaint, and I keep saying to people that the issues that exist to prevent electric operating will be removed. It's coming. Hyundai in America are testing a concept of on-street charging, because this is another massive bugbear from people say, I live in an apartment, so therefore I can't drive an electric vehicle. But what's interesting about this, they're doing it in Brooklyn in New York, but they're partnering up with the people who own the apartment blocks. And this means they can it's a very fast process, because they do a deal with the person who owns the apartment block. They get some revenue from the revenue that's been generated from this charging point on the street. And it's a fast system, because as opposed to having to deal with the people who supply the electrical infrastructure and deal possibly with the people who supply the electricity, and they have to deal possibly with councils and planning and all this type of stuff. This is a very fast way to go to the people who own the property, cut a deal with them, install some points along the street or in the parking in the building, and lo and behold, there you've solved your parking, your on-street parking issue. So they're trialling this with a view to see how it works. But if this was to work, I think rapidly you could start to see that issue on-street parking, no charging, or building parking with no charging. It could rapidly be resolved, because it's in the interest of the building owner to have this installed as well, because it provides a service to the people who stay in the building, but he also makes some revenue from it. Stellantis, who really were, in all the press we read in the last while, were very focused on the ban that's coming in 2035 on ICE vehicles, and were really saying that they were going to have rid of all ICE vehicles before that point. But it's interesting now that there's a press release coming from them this week that says they're working on EFuel technology. So they're kind of possibly jumping on the bandwagon here now, because the Germans really have managed to get EFuel to be allowed after 2035. So Stellantis are now looking at this. They're testing a range of engines at the moment, engines ranging from as far back as 2014 to all the current engines and engines that are going to be coming out into the future. They're experimenting with EFuel on them to see how it performs. 90% reduction on emissions seems to be the standard reduction amount that's going to occur with EFuel. But interestingly, with other manufacturers like Porsche or Audi, they're talking about EFuel, but they're also developing up manufacturing facilities to produce EFuel. Stellantis have no mention of that in any of the press releases they sent out, and they have no mention of the fact that it's not exactly a product for an economical car. It's three times as much energy to produce it and costs 3 times as much as petrol. So again, if you're trying to work out where EFuels fit, it seems to fit in the area of high performance road vehicles like Porsches and for vintage and classic and motorsport. So not quite sure what direction Stellantis are going on putting this testing energy into EFuels here. Staying with Porsche, they are developing a system they call V2X. It's a vehicle to everything communication platform. It needs a Wi-Fi network, and the idea is that cars talk to each other and they can talk to the traffic infrastructure, so they can talk to the traffic lights as well to assist in free-flowing traffic, free-flowing light systems. This system requires Wi-Fi, and at the moment what they're doing is they're testing what effect speed has on your Wi-Fi delivery. And they've done an analysis and discovered that at 100 kilometers an hour, it's very easy to reach 150 megabits per second. At 200 kilometers an hour, you get down to 120 megabits per second. And they're saying their system works fine at 90 megabits per second. So in general, the car can operate and be able to communicate in most Wi-Fi environments. So again, an interesting aspect of this is that they're saying is that this could reduce or almost completely stop road accidents, because the cars are speaking to each other independently of anything to do with the driver. So another interesting concept, which ultimately could mean the end of body shops if it was ever to become deployed completely out there. In the 70s and the 80s, experts said that you weren't going to be able to put any more than 150 brake horsepower through the front wheels of a car due to the problems you were going to have with torque steer. Well, the front wheel drive Honda Civic Type R has just broken the record at Nuremberg. It's done a 7 minutes 45 seconds around Nuremberg. The only thing that wasn't standard in that car was Michelin Pilot Sport Cup tyres. Other than that, the car was as from factory. It's a special edition model with a lightened chassis. It's called the Type R S. It puts out 325 brake horsepower through the front wheels. So an incredible amount of power going out through the front wheels, and obviously it handles well because it's after doing that incredible time around Nuremberg. The previous record holder in Nuremberg was the Renault Megane RS, and previous to that was the older Type R. So Honda are back on top around Nuremberg. Battery electric vehicles, market share in Europe is now currently sitting at 14%. Battery electric vehicle sales for the month of March increased by 58% in Europe. 151,500 vehicles were sold in March. Sales in general in Europe are going well. They're up for the first quarter by 18%. But I think now finally the full production seems to be coming on stream, with the production issues, parts issues, chip shortage issues seem all to be behind us now, and the market seems to be getting back to a normal type of a position. CATL is the Chinese battery manufacturer. It's the world's largest battery manufacturer, and this is really where China's strength lie in terms of electric vehicles. They seem to be really far ahead of everybody else in battery production, in battery technology, and CATL have come up with a new battery technology. They're calling it a condensed matter battery. It's a semi-solid state battery. It uses condensed electrolyte, and new separator material is used in the battery. The energy density of the battery is double the current technology. And they're saying that this battery is going to be in mass production by the end of the year. So I suppose when I speak to people and they say, oh, do you think this electric thing's going to work? I keep saying that the rate of evolution, the speed at which the developments are taking place is astonishing. So therefore, whatever you think about electric today, you have to rethink it tomorrow, because they're just getting better and better literally by the day. Tesla had a good first quarter. They sold 422,000 vehicles. But interesting, when you look at the numbers from Tesla as to what's happening, their production was up by 36% for the first quarter, which sounds really good. But they were actually increasing their production by 50% per quarter. So 36% doesn't look so good when you compare it to the previous quarters of 56%. And also what's interesting is we know they're dropping the price in the market. The operating margin is now down to 11.4%, which is still very good, but they're no longer the best. Previously, Tesla made the most money on its cars, but that's no longer the case. So you can see the strategic position that Tesla's taking now. It had all this margin, and it's now starting to give that margin away in order to stay up in the sales figures. Elon Musk is saying that they were going after sales growth, not profit. But I think that's obvious. That's obvious what they're doing here. They're dropping the price in order to retain their sales. Another interesting figure was that they've got 15 days of supply in stock, which isn't, again, a large amount of vehicles by industry standards, but it's 400% up on last year. So there's 15 days worth of stock hanging around, 400% more than there was last year. So again, it's really starting to hot up in the EV market, because all the other traditional brands and the newer brands are all starting to have an effect on this area that was almost owned and dominated by Tesla. And to anybody that's in the business of buying and selling cars in Ireland, a real blow to the import of UK cars since Brexit came in was that the margin vehicle was not profitable, because previously when you imported a car from the UK in the trade, if it was a margin vehicle, you simply applied VAT to your profit. As a result of Britain becoming a third country, you had to apply VAT to the full amount. So let's say it was a €10,000 car. If you were making 2,000 profit on it, you put your VAT on your 2,000. But under the new system, you put your VAT on the 12,000, which just blew the car out of the price range of where it should be. The UK government has or will introduce a new scheme from the 1st of May, which will allow the trade, people operating in the trade, people registered for VAT, to claim back the VAT on the vehicle. So it kind of gets you back to the same position. A little bit cumbersome from the point of view that, you know, you have an administrative task, you've got paperwork to do with the car, but you're going to be able to get that big element of that car out of the price now. So it's going to mean that predominantly margin cars were cars that were 3, 4, 5 year old, and you just weren't able to buy them. So that whole segment virtually closed down, which should be able to re-establish itself now under this new scheme. That's it for this week. Like, comment, subscribe, share. You know the gig. If you know anybody in the trade and they might be interested in some of the stuff we have on here, pass it on. Share it with other people if you can. It would be great help to us. Thanks for that, and see you next week.